It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Monday, July 8th, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another week together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Provi In The Media, the Sunday Message Word Study, and of course commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing? And yes, it is Monday again over here in Malaysia. It is a public holiday, so no one is going to work. It is still Sunday for me. I've already left Penang, but I stopped by in Ipoh to drop one of my friends off. And it's about 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes away from KL. But at the moment, it's about 3 hours and a half to get back. Not because there's a ton of traffic. Well, there is a ton of traffic, but it's because we checked on the navigation and there are 2 accidents on the way back to KL. So we decided to kind of just stay over here for a couple of hours so we can relax and then just enjoy our time. No one's in a rush because tomorrow is a holiday. Well, Monday is a holiday for everyone here. No one's working. So we are enjoying our time right now. I hope that you guys have had a wonderful, awesome weekend and a great Sunday service. Don't forget, every single Thursday is question and answer Thursday, so get those questions ready. Send them to me whenever you can. And for today's video, if you haven't yet, leave a like and comment to build our community. I'm just very happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. So let's get up and support each other each and every day. All right, this week's Sunday message title, great title, I love it, Grace and Truth. So, of course, you guys all heard the Sunday service, a ton of word, basically all on grace, and I hope that's something that you guys are looking forward to listening to and going over during the word study also, okay? So, yes, I just got back from Penang. I should be back home in KL probably sometime tonight. I would say by, 10, 11 p.m., around that time, but, you know, we're slowly taking our time back because of those 2 accidents that we saw. That's on the highway on the way back to Kuala Lumpur. But yeah, I enjoyed the trip very, very much. It was so chill. So chill, no fixed schedule. We went from one place and then not knowing where the next place would be. And then we decide the next place after that while we're at the other place. It was so chill. And I think if you're someone who really needs a schedule, like a fixed schedule, I don't think you'd like it. I'm not sure how many people are like that, but I know that some people need a schedule, so it feels like they're having a good vacation and that, you know, they're doing the things they need to do. But it was so chill. I guess it's because it's a bunch of guys. We're at the hotel playing cards. We rest at the hotel, you know, for a little bit here and there. Some went swimming, some rested. We went out together. It was just super nice, super relaxed. Nothing stressful at all. And I would say one of the best times we had during this trip was actually in the car, because it's a 4-hour drive to Penang from Kuala Lumpur, and it's obviously a 4-hour drive back with a pit stop in Ipoh, which is a city we picked up one of our friends from. So it was really interesting just to have this guy conversation, guy talks, and it's interesting. Once we started talking, we stayed on one subject for like 3 to 4 hours. Like, remember, it's only 4.5 hours altogether. About 3.5 hours was all talking about one subject, as crazy as that sounds, right? And in the car, a bunch of us just enjoying the conversations. And I would say in that 4.5 hour drive, I would say maybe there was a combined sleeping of about 20 minutes. I think that's what I felt, right? But you guys might be wondering, like, what kind of topic were we really on? Well, like, what were we really talking about? And the big topic we were talking about was self-love. I thought it was a very, very interesting topic. And it's about loving yourself before loving others, which sounds really off, doesn't it? It sounds off like, wait, I thought we're supposed to put others above us. I thought we're supposed to take care of other people. And it's true. Like when more and more at the beginning, there's only 3 of us in the car. Oh, and then we picked up one person on the way at Ipoh. And then in Penang, we picked up someone from the airport. So we ended up with 5 in the end. But we all asked the question about self-love. And the interesting thing was, sometimes people think of the word to have self-love as like being selfish, like thinking only about yourself. And what we were just trying to figure out is, what is the stigma around self-love? Do people really even love themselves? And this is one of the things that we saw was kind of a problem is a lot of people don't give love to themselves, but they kind of give all their love to other people. And we were thinking about to ourselves like, okay, so, are there even any Bible verses that talk about loving yourself? And we found a couple of them. Like, for instance, when you look at the golden rule, right? The 2 greatest commandments in the Bible. The first one is love God. And then the second one is an interesting one because it says, love your neighbor as you want to be loved, or love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that's not saying that if you don't love yourself, then don't treat your neighbors like that. It's kind of telling us that it's a golden rule. We need to love ourselves and love people too. Right? Both of those things really matters. You have to love yourself too. So we looked at that and say, okay, Matthew 22, 36 to 40 has that rule of loving yourself, right? There's one. And there's another verse that I found that was that was pretty cool, was Ephesians chapter 5, verse 28, 29. And this is about like marriage. And it says, he who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does to the church. Right? So it's talking about here is when you love your wife, you want to love your wife as you love yourself, right? No one ever hates their own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, right? So when you're loving your wife and you become one with your wife, you are actually doing a good thing. Like, it's loving yourself and loving your wife at the same time. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 8, I like this one too. The one who gets wisdom loves life. The one who cherishes understanding will soon prosper. So part of loving ourselves is to gain wisdom, is to get better understanding, to be more knowledgeable. And these are all things that talk about us getting to love ourselves better through gaining knowledge and gaining wisdom. I would say the last one, the one that I found quite an interesting one, was in 1 Timothy chapter 3. And this is, I think, is basically the entire chapter. And it's interesting, well, not the whole chapter, it's like 1 to 13, but Paul talks about the qualifications for an overseer or a deacon, like a deacon or an elder. And what it basically says is, if you want to rule over other people, you need to be able to rule well over your family. And then it takes it down another level and says, yeah, and if you want to rule over your family, you have to also be someone who can rule over yourself, right? So like it tells you, like, if you want to be someone who can lead, the person who's going to lead has to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family. So here you already see that it's talking about the individual. The individual has to be that good, right, in order for them to be a leader. So when you see this, it kind of shows you that, if you want to be someone who loves really well, you have to be someone who can love themselves well too. And I would even say that when you look at even Sunsim and his mission, Sunsim didn't start his mission by loving other people. He started his mission by training himself first, developing and making himself first before anyone else. 20 years in the mountains, training, working hard on himself first before coming out into the world to be saved, right? It's like Sunsim says this is, how can we save a man from drowning if we're drowning ourselves, if we haven't learned to swim yet, right? And it's something that I do think it's a great question. The great question is, how much do we truly love ourselves? How much do you, like, how much effort or how much do you consciously try to put in effort to be better, to love yourself even more? And we were talking about love as in, if we're going to be someone that loves ourselves, what does that actually mean? Okay. So, one of the guys was talking about, the difference between liking and loving, right? And, he gave an example of a rose. Okay, so let's just say there's a rose. And if you like the rose, you will pick that rose, take it into your house, put it into a vase, right? And then after a couple of weeks, it's going to die. Or after a couple of days, it's just going to die, right? So that's when you like something. But when you love the rose, you don't pick it out, you leave it, and you allow the rose to grow, right? You'll help the rose, but you'll allow the rose to grow to its full potential, right? And when I listened to that, I was like, that makes a lot of sense, because if this is how we really treat someone we love, we allow them to grow to their best person, to the best version of themselves, then what about ourselves? How can we know that we are actually loving ourselves well? And I thought that one of the things that we could look at is, are you allowing yourself to develop and become the best version of yourself? Do you really love yourself? And that is something I think a lot of us can really look at and say, wow, am I doing things for myself that allows me to grow to the best I'm able to be at, right? Are you at that level where you love yourself to that point where you you develop yourself, you self-development, you learn, you're praying, the word, all these other different things are there, but you allow yourself to grow to your best version of yourself. And I think that is something that we really have to think about is, are you making yourself to that level? Are you allowing yourself to grow to that version of yourself? And I think that's something that we can look at and say that, do you really love yourself? Do you have that self-love? Because, sometimes we give so much, but we have nothing for ourselves. And this is why we burn out. And this is why we go through a lot of struggle and a lot of trouble, because we have enough for everyone else, but we don't have enough for ourselves. And I think that's why Sunsteam is always saying, remember I told you guys before, what Sunsteam said is, even for leaders, to put your life on the line means to put your life on the line and let, life on the line 80% and leave the 20% so that you can at least get home. It's like say if you have a full tank for a car, you got to leave 20% so you can at least get home, right? You got to be able to at least get home. And that's something I think that we have to really think about also. And I'm hoping that that we can have these types of conversations with each other, or with yourself or someone you really trust, is, do you have enough love for yourself? Are you developing yourself? Are you making yourself better? Are you putting yourself into a position that you can become the best version of yourself? And I think that's something that we can all love ourselves more, because like Sandeep said in the beginning, how do you save others if you can't save yourself? And many times it seems like, what's the point of saving others and bringing them to salvation if you yourself are not saved? It doesn't make any sense, right? So I hope that's something that we can all, and you can imagine how far this subject can go. We talked about this for like 3 to 4 hours, three and a half hours just on this one subject. 3 to 5 of us at one point just constantly talking about this. So I thought that was a great conversation. Interestingly, on the way back, we took the first 2 hours on the way back, and that was interesting because there wasn't much conversation. I think everyone was just tired. I was a little bit tired too, but I was driving, so I made sure I got some rest last night. But I got, if you guys saw my Instagram, I got recharged when we met up with Daniel. Daniel, he's a Malaysian member of Blessed Family, and he brought his kid, and that was awesome. I recharged by playing with the baby. So I think that's what allowed me to be able to, it allowed me to gain energy so I can drive back for the first the first leg to Ipoh. So right now it's interesting. My friend has a cafe over here, like a specialty coffee cafe, and I thought it was kind of cool because, well, we're here, but I am not inside. I'm actually recording in my car right now because I just don't want to. I don't want to be distracted or bothered by the people around me, and he's got customers and stuff in there, and I don't want to distract others, and I don't want others to distract me. Well, technically, I don't really get bothered by other people, but I don't want to bother other people with that kind of stuff too. But one thing we did talk about, I thought was kind of cool, is we talked about having the men's conference, like having these ideas for a men's conference. And we want it more. We definitely want it more than just an online thing. I think an online, I personally, but maybe because I'm old school, I think it'll work far better with the camaraderie and brotherhood of physically being together. I think that would be better. I'm not sure what you guys think out there, but I think physically coming together is far better. Being in front of each other, playing cards, playing games, making fun of each other, farting, burping, like even at this trip, we were burping a lot because we had durian and stuff. But, it's funny. We're like farting, burping, guessing who farted by the smell. We just did the guy stuff. Well, maybe only the guys that I hang out with, but, guy things. It would be great if we could do something that is a mixture of physical and spiritual that can really, really help people out. For instance, of course, when we meet, we're going to have a service. Of course, we're going to have that time to relax together, enjoy each other's company. We want to have competition of sports, games, all these other different things, good food, barbecues. We need like that locker room banter. And I think it's totally worth it to be with each other in this type of setting. And, actually, this is what's kind of cool. You know how on my Instagram, I was posting all these pictures of what we're doing in Penang and stuff. And as I'm posting pictures, other guys are DMing us because we're putting bro time. And they're like, oh, I need bro time. And we're like, yeah, you know what? See, like already just doing this type of thing and doing it together, there's already people like are commenting and DMing saying, hey, I want to come next time. I want to come to the next trip and stuff like that too. So I think this would be a kind of a cool idea that will maybe catch some fire step by step. Of course, we can't do this very often, maybe once or twice a year, but I think it would be great. I think it would. And I think I think because there are so few guys, and the rest of the girls, even in leadership, are mainly female. I think guys kind of need this time. We need this time together. We need this bro time kind of thing. So I thought it was kind of cool just to have people like DMing us and saying, oh, we want bro time kind of thing, right? And we were actually talking about this bro conference. I guess we'll just call it the bro conference. But what would we actually do there? And we were thinking that there are going to be so many different types of guys there, like whether they'll be a family member, there'll be a blessed family, they're going to be like some family JS, or they're going to be campus or career and whatnot. And we were thinking about like, man, we should have like programs that fits everyone. Everyone doesn't need to listen to the same thing. People should go to the little conferences or things that they want to do. For example, like we were thinking like, oh, it would be great for all guys to have a workshop on finance, right? Finance would be a great workshop. We were thinking about even people who are about to graduate campus, how to transition into career, having the right mentality and mindset, or those people who are still like 3-4 years away from doing the blessing, what to prepare for the blessing. Like the example we gave is like people should be doing at least start to save money for the blessing. And what came into our heads, we're like, in Malaysia, we'd be like, oh, well, like 50,000 ringgit in 4 years kind of thing. Like if you had 3 to 4 years, if you could save 50,000 ringgit, that would be a great start kind of thing, right? And I think it's necessary. We do need to save our money and such. So we're like, yeah, we should have like these things, these goals that we have, these targets that we want to accomplish so that we can, that we're able to help all the guys in different areas. What was the other one we talked about? Doing well in school, like probably something for school, probably something for job, getting people to have the right mentality and mindset. But, there is one thing we said that would 100% change everything in this bro conference. And that would be Sunseem sending a message for the bros. You know what I mean? Sunseem sending a message telling, helping the bros or helping men, having a word for the guys. I think that would be the ultimate thing. Once you have that, you have everything. Once you have that, you have everything, right? And I think that would be the thing that takes the cake. That would be the thing that we'd be like, oh, that is so awesome. We definitely want to do this. If we can get a letter, Sunseem just talking about giving men's education, I think that would be awesome. Like definitely awesome. But yeah, those are kind of the thoughts that I was having. And I thought to myself, is like, yeah, this is something that, now that we're talking about it more and more. Like, I don't know if there's a way to do a sister conference. There'd have to be sisters out there that want to do it. From my experience, I would say it's harder to gather females than it's to gather males. I would say. Because guys are more simple. And guys are, like, let me give you an example. I don't know if this is really possible for girls, but I haven't seen it happen is, like, we can plan a trip in 24 hours. Hey, you want to go? All right, when are you going? In 3 days. All right, let's go. Boom. Oh, you want to go tomorrow? Sure, I'll go. And we just go. We plan a trip. We leave the next day. We don't know the full schedule, and it's okay. It's just hanging out, doing guy stuff. Like the trips that I've seen, well, I saw a trip that never happened because it was like, oh, guys are going on trips. Why don't girls go on trips? And this is what happened when I was in LA. And, the guys went to Las Vegas. The girls like, we want to go to Vegas too. And we're like, go ahead. Plan your own trip. 6 months later, they still didn't go. Even 6 months later, they still didn't go on that trip, right? So I think it's a little bit harder for a sisters conference. That's just my personal feeling. I'm not even sure why I brought it up. But I think that's part of the reason why there's that big difference between guys and girls. We can do it in 24 hours. And we'll just go on the trip. We'll drive for like 3-4 hours. But this is something I think that's one of the benefits of being simple. Like super simple. Right? So, like that's something that I was thinking about. But, I have a question for you guys is, what style are you? Are you someone who needs to plan a lot? Or are you someone who is more spontaneous? Or are you a mix? But I know usually some people are way more spontaneous than they are like in planning. I do think both are necessary, but the most important thing, I would say this. It's good to be spontaneous and it's good to be a planner. Both are necessary. But of course, we're stronger on one side or the other. But I would say the most important thing that is needed is flexibility. That's what I would say. It's one of those things that are absolutely important. And I would say particularly, not just for everyone, but particularly when it comes to leadership, I would say flexibility. And the reason is when you look at all the stuff that happens in Providence all the time, one of the things I'm pretty sure that all of us can agree on is it's very rare for things to happen exactly the way you wanted it to. Isn't that true? It's rare. It's rare for things to happen in a certain way. It really is. And I would say that because things don't always happen the way that you want, we have to be very flexible, that things aren't going to work that way. We got to be able to adapt and change. And I think that good leaders will be flexible with others. I do think so. The good leaders should be flexible with others too, right? So when you have I was thinking to myself, is like, when do people actually become really flexible? Like, when can someone become flexible? And why are people not flexible? And I would say is, of course, some things I don't think everything needs flexibility because some things, when it comes to things that require precision and stuff like that, you can't guess and you can't, you have to shut things down. Like, for instance, if you're making a car, if you're making some type of tech car or those types of things, the accuracy and precision is absolutely important, right? But when it comes to like leading and stuff, where you plan something and it doesn't turn out that way and you have to kind of change things around, I would say as a leader and going through my own experiences, I would say the times when I was not flexible is when I was very short-term minded. Like the timeline was very, very short. And when my main concern is short-term, I care too much about people doing well right now. And you push people that may not be ready to do well right now. And on the flip side, when you have long-term goals, when you look at people or things in a very long term, looking at it from a timeline that's very long term, I would say that you will allow for more things to go wrong and you're okay with it because it's a long-term thing. It's like, for instance, when it comes to pre-dawn, when you think too short-term, you're thinking that everyone has to go to pre-dawn and you're not taking into consideration everyone's current situation or circumstance, right? If they're a newcomer or not. You're just like, everyone has to go kind of thing, right? And when it's long term, you're like, hey, what matters the most is that this person eventually does pray down, and they need to grow step by step. You know what I mean? And when you think long term, you're like, at least by the end, by a certain time frame, they should be pretty good at this. And this is when you look more at long term, looking things from a long term timeline. I think this is when people are able to become more flexible. Like, I think that's, I was reflecting because I was thinking about myself when I was flexible and when I wasn't. But I think, I'm starting to realize more things about myself. Especially like on this trip, I had a conversation with some other, not with the guys, but I was on the phone with a leader and stuff like that too. And I started to really think about some interesting things I see about myself. And it is interesting. So I've been in province for 26 years now. And I've seen many cycles. Now, what does that mean, cycles? Like, a cycle is something that happens in Providence, and then it finishes, and you go to another major cycle, right? And I've been through so many cycles in Providence. I see how things happen. I see what it was like in the past and what it is now. I see certain systems or methods we used to do things, and the way, I look at myself and others when it comes to leadership and evangelism. And, there's some things that I've just seen so many times, and I know that they don't work. And not because not because I've done it 20,000 times. It's not only because I've done it, because I've seen it done in other places all the time. And I know it doesn't work. And I already know what the outcome is going to be. So what's interesting is working with people and such. Now that I have this experience, it's very interesting. And I can see myself, and I realize more about myself is, in the beginning, I do bring things up, and I'll tell people straight up, I don't know if this is going to work. And it's not a negative thing, but it could be seen as a negative thing because I'm just basically telling them it might not work. And younger leaders will see it as being negative or maybe just being stubborn or old. But later you get to a point where what you say is not going to, is just, there's no point of saying it anymore because it just causes more problems. And you don't talk about it because the reaction is going to be the same, and you kind of just watch the cycle happen all over again, which is a little bit frustrating too. And because there's no communication between young and old generations, what's happening even now in this generation is happening again from what we see in the past. Like, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is happening in the exact same way as it was done before. And the younger generations will look at the older generations, see them as stubborn or negative, unhelpful, grumpy, hard to work with, and that kind of stuff, right? And then the older generation will look at the younger generation and say, wow, they're passionate and so much energy, but they're inexperienced and lack wisdom because they just haven't gone through it yet. They're just going through the exact same thing that every generation before them went through, including the old people. We all see it kind of thing, right? And I talked about this before of getting the two generations to come together, which I think is absolutely important. And when I looked at myself, because I'm a lot older and I've just been through so many things, when I was younger, I would say yes to everything. When I'm older now, I do not. I just don't. I'm very good at saying no. I won't do everything that others want. I'll look at, and it's not like I'm not just purposely trying to rebel. It's more of, I've seen this before. Why would I put my energy into it if it's going to be unfruitful, ineffective, or inefficient? Do you know what I mean? Like, I look and say that, is it worth my time? Is it worth my energy I'm putting into this? And like I said, I have tried many methods. And if the methods are just the same as they were before, and it's all a matter of just working hard on the same methods, in my mind, I'm like, there's no point of me putting my effort into it because I already know what the result is going to be. I already know. The result is not as worth as much as everything that was put in. And I can see now. I look even more like, yeah, I could totally see that as the younger generation looking and saying, man, these older generations are so hard to work with. It's so this or so that, right? And I would actually agree. It's harder because if you've been through something and you've seen it happen constantly all the time, you're not going to want to do it again. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to put in that much energy for like zero fruit. You know what I mean? And I thought to myself, is like, as I age, our time is, what do you call it? We lack time and we lack energy, which means we want to put ourselves into a position, like a winning position kind of thing. That's what we really want. We don't want to sit there like putting in so much energy and nothing coming about it. And we just don't want to do the same things as we did before. And or I would say this would be acceptable. Like, in my mind, as an older generation person, I wouldn't mind doing something of the same method if it was done with knowledge and wisdom. Meaning, for instance, if it's like a small pioneering church, like, there is not necessary to gather 1,000 people. It's just not. There's no need. They just need to do one-on-one Bible studies, and it's in a pioneering stage, and that's the easiest way to do it and the most efficient and best way to do it, to find one person at a time. And that makes sense to me, right? And if they do it with that type of knowledge, knowing that, hey, we are thinking about doing it this way, but we know that we don't have enough manpower, we don't have the ability, we don't have the lectures, we don't have this or this, so we want to do it in this way. And for me, that would be like, yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense, and I can get on board to that, right? But personally, if it doesn't fit those things, I would say I would rather try something new that fails than trying the same thing that fails. You know what I mean? I would rather knock out a new idea and say, that didn't work, so let's see what else we can do, rather than doing the exact same thing over and over again, and then doing that same thing over and over again that we know is not going to be that successful anyways, right? But it's hard to get two generations to come together. It's just, we're very different. Like, in this car, when I'm talking to these people here, we have I'm a generation. Me and one guy, we're both Generation X. Then we have we have two millennials and one Gen Z. I think that's what we had. So we had like 3 generations in here, and it's very different the way that we think. Like, we're all in agreement with certain things, and we really hang out well together, but you can tell there's a distinct difference in our thinking, in our thoughts too. We're all going towards the same goal though, and that's why it works so well, is because we're all going towards the same place. And I think that was really, really good. But it's just different. And I think this is where harmony plays such a huge role. And if we can bring the two generations together, like, I only see it happening in larger countries. I haven't seen it in any other country. I see it working in Japan. I see it working in Taiwan. I see it working in Korea. But there's no other countries like that, really, right? That you have generations working with each other. And I can see why Korea, Japan, and Taiwan grow so big, and they can grow well. They're so organized, and they have such a huge amount of members. And there has to be a way to do it. There has to be a way to get generations to come together and think about what is the best way to do things, or how are we going to bring things to that next level, right? And if I were to bring my train of thought to the next level of realization, I would say is, when I look at myself right now, I'm just working on my own. I'm working in a very, very small group, not part of a church structure. And I find it easier to do things and make decisions and try new things out because it's so small. However, I remember being a head leader, and I know that making a decision inside a church is very difficult, and it's not easy because there are many people to consider, much discussion that has to be made, and it's much more bureaucratic and it just requires more, and it's understandable because there are more people involved with it. And It's easy to do things in a small group or alone, but it's not easy to make a huge impact with one or a very small group. It's way harder to do things together in groups, but the impact is huge, right? And it's kind of like, what are we trying to do in Providence? Is we're trying to make huge impact on the world. So yeah, I think that's another discussion that needs to be made, is how do we get generations to work together, work for the better? And I know it's a huge hill to climb, and maybe it's something that I'm not sure. Like, I even sometimes I think to myself, is it hopeless? Like, can my generation or the generations that are working together right now, can we actually work together? And I would say eventually yes, because I see it working in Korea, I see it working in Taiwan, and leaders from my generation and before are still running in different capacities in those big countries. So I thought that was super hopeful to see. It was really hopeful to see. It was hopeful to go to Taiwan and see older generations and younger generations working together. I thought that was awesome. I really did. So that is something I looked at and said, "Wow, that's great. That's awesome." And I hope it's something that we can. I hope it's something that we can really pray about and reach a new level with too. Either way, all right. So yeah, that's kind of a bunch of the thoughts. This train of thought that I was having while on this trip with the guys. I hope it's something that you guys can really gain a lot from also, and kind of it spurs your thinking. And if you have any other, any things you want to add, go ahead, put it in the comments below too. Okay. So yeah, today we also have the Sunday Message Word Study coming up next. Before we get into it, let's get into the first music break of the day. All right, so let's get into today's Sunday Message Word Study, and a very hungry message indeed. Lots to talk about, a lot of things to go over, but great title. The title is Grace and truth. And this is something I did really feel also. Something that we really need at this time is grace and truth, right? Of course, you can't just have grace by itself, just that feeling. Like when you praise, you can't just have that feeling of grace, but we also need to have the truth behind it so that we are feeling the right things for the right reasons, right? So, right from the get go, the title is awesome. And I would say when it came to the intro message, was great, but it was all about how the leaders delivered the word, and it really makes a difference on how God works with us, right? If the word is delivered in a good way, then what's going to happen is we will be able to receive. Oh, the different things that the message said was faith, belief, actions, grace, change according to how the word is delivered. And, that obviously puts a lot of pressure onto the head leaders when they deliver too. And, some parts are like, the Holy Spirit's watching to see how powerfully the preachers give inspiration. Like the Holy Spirit is watching us. And, the listeners must listen deeply and valuably. So I like that also where it's not just putting all the onus is not put on only the leaders, but leaders and followers. We need to listen well too. We need to listen deeply. And in order for us to listen really well, what has to happen? We have to be those that pray, right? If we pray a lot, then we hear things spiritually, then we hear things deeply, and it begins to feel even more real to us. So, it's not just the leaders preaching powerfully, but sometimes we don't receive that power and fire because the listener, no matter how fiery the preacher is, the listeners, we have to be those that also receive and realize the word with that same shimjung as the person who's receiving the word, right? So I like how it puts responsibility on the preacher. The preacher has to have the shimjung. But on top of the preacher having the shimjung, it's we also, the listeners, have to have the same shimjung as the one who's received the word. Okay? So that was a great intro. It kind of opens our hearts and our minds to how great we should be listening to this word too. All right? So let's move into the actual points of the message. Okay? And it started off with failing to understand the shimjung of God. And it's interesting because it's like you fail to know my shimjung in my heart, even though I helped you with all my life. So sometimes it almost feels like those are two completely different topics, but they're not. They're not different topics, right? It's about treating them well. Knowing their shimjung and heart. And it's more frustrating because God and the Holy Spirit are helping us with their life on the line, yet we can't even know their heart. And I think it's kind of one of these like reciprocal transactions, meaning that, hey, God is doing so much for us, and what God really wants is for us to understand his heart. And I would say we would be exactly the same thing. Now, what does that mean? Well, think about it. If we help someone, get them out, help them from this most difficult time in their life, I think the one thing that we would want in return is not going to be like money and stuff like that. We never did it for money. What did we do it for? We did it so that they can understand our heart. They can understand who we are and stuff like that too. So that is something that I looked at and said, that's something interesting that we do need to think about more clearly, right? And I think where Sunseem realized more deeply about this is like, hey, look, I'm helping you guys for my entire life. I've been helping you, but they don't recognize my heart and all the things I've done for them, all the things I've sacrificed. Like this is Sunseem's thoughts, right? And then he said, wow, if I feel this way towards people, how much more does God feel this towards the lives? And when Sunseem realized this, he connected with God immediately. And I think this is something that's really interesting is part of like connecting to God also has to do with realizations. And this is like kind of, I think this would be similar to Sunseem realizing God's heart. And once you realize the heart, there's a connection, right? There's a connection there. And it's so shocking. And when Sunseem came with that shimjung and that heart, God treated him with more love because, wow, you realized my heart from this too. And I think this is something that we do have to always magnify things to God's level, right? Whenever something happened, it's not just us saying, oh, God, I went through this and I went through that. More than that, it's, wow, God, if I'm frustrated by this, how much more are you frustrated in the same way, right? And I think that's something that we do have to take into consideration too, right? And what was the thing that Sunstein was saying that also later on in the message? He's like, one thing that's really like frustrating about people is in the beginning we recognize or we receive God's grace, but it's only briefly. And then after that we forget, and then we're just oblivious to the grace, and we keep asking God to treat us better and better. It's a very selfish act that we do. And this is where the message was like, and this is a type of love God has. It says it's an unrequited love, this love that doesn't come back to him, right? That even if he loves us his entire lifetime, we don't connect with that person once. And it's a one-way love that we're doing with God. And I think that's something that we have to take into consideration of our relationship with God, to what extent and to what level, right? So I think that is something that we have to realize about ourselves well too. There's some parts of the message that talked about when we benefit from grace, right? When we greatly benefit from God's grace, we change our hearts later. And it's kind of like we just talked about this a little bit, is our hearts change and we just keep taking from God. It's like, whenever we face this huge problem, a crisis, a difficulty, a hardship, and we're like, God, I promise everything for you. Oh, please solve my problem, right? And then we put all of our hope into heaven. We vow, oh, please, God. And even after our problems are solved, we're only thankful for a certain moment. And Sunstein brought up that story in Luke chapter 17 where Jesus heals 10 lepers, but only one gives glory to God. And it's only 10%. Only 10% will actually do it, right? So, it was really sad when Sunstein talked about that person he prayed for and helped them from dying. And this person said, hey, guess what? I'll give you a portion of my wealth. But the moment he really needed like 10,001, that's it. Didn't even give him any money. He basically said he needed money, but this guy wouldn't even give him 10,001. And what eventually happened to this wealthy man was he basically got sick again and died. And the realization Sunstein had is when a person has a change of heart, he will die, which is kind of scary, right? And we have to think about that. When our hearts change, we die. And I'm obviously not talking literally we die. But what's even scarier is if we spiritually die. One thing in the message I thought was quite interesting is when the message says, oh, do you know why people forget the grace? People forget grace because they don't need help anymore. Right? The suffering's ended. So once the suffering ends, they no longer need that help. So what happens? They forget about the grace they received. Right? And I think that's something that we have to think about is, are we forgetting the grace we receive too easily just because life is better? It's almost like God doesn't want to make things better for us because we keep forgetting about him during those times. But we have to be those that are even more thankful to God when things are better too. That's what we have to be. The message said, the reasons why does God give us grace? Is not to make us just live comfortably. That's a very small reason, is to live comfortably. But we have been given grace. We have been given a life of grace so that we can give grace to others. We can benefit other people. We can benefit people in Providence, outside Providence. It's like when you go out to preach the gospel, you give grace to others. That's what we're doing. And one thing that Sunstein said is like grace is a form of wealth. If you waste it, you will come to ruin. God doesn't give you grace because there's enough grace, so let me just give you some grace. No, there is a purpose for us to receive grace. And this is why we have to multiply it like the talents, right? What kind of grace is there? God gives us grace of like financial wealth, material wealth, love, faith, a good environment, meeting a good person, saving our life, giving us a place to stay, good environment. There's so many things. Good health, I think, was one of the best ones. And God is giving us these things, whether it's helping us with mental things, knowledge of the word, resolving difficulties, even getting a job is God's grace. There's so many things. And sometimes there's hundreds of thousands of ways we receive God's grace. Which means if you think about just the things I named off, how much grace have we been receiving? We've been receiving immense grace, incredible grace. And that's why we need to be faithful until we die. We have to live the life of grace, of thanksgiving and love, and not just take care of ourselves, but we have to take care of all those around us. And what Sansim said is, he says, if you want to receive grace, right? If you want to receive grace, what's the best way to receive grace? Is living a life of grace. If you can live a life of grace, then you're someone who can get grace, right? So I think it's something that we have to really think about very carefully. It's like, hey, if you want grace, live the life of grace. Produce a harvest of grace, right? And the way that the Holy Spirit is like, farm the produce of grace. It's difficult, but make it grow, make it multiply. One thing I didn't think about that came from the message was God not only just gives grace, but God gives and takes away. God gives and takes away. God gives to the appropriate people, but God also takes away. And think about this, when you don't even know that you've received God's grace, a lot of times we think it's just a coincidence, that it just happened out of nowhere and you're like, oh, lucky me. And another thing that I thought was very interesting was there's grace that's given by God and also grace that's given by people too. So people can give grace also, but God gives grace too. And when you look at how God, and after it says that people give grace and God gives grace, but God also gives grace by making those who have received grace repay it. Some people even run errands of grace for God, right? So how do we receive God's grace? Many different ways, whether it's angels, whether it's people, whether it's revelations and such through nature, right? So many different ways. You know, watching the Animal Kingdom channel, you can realize about God's grace through that too. God is using so many different ways to grant us grace. So that's something that I was like, yeah, we have to realize there's so many times God's giving us grace. Like even right now, I would say we're receiving God's grace that we checked our phones before we left to go to KL. Because why? Right? One thing that's so important is, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah. I forgot what it was. I just lost my train of thought. Okay. So, and then I like the part where Sansi was just naming off all the grace that Providence as a history has received, whether it's the history of the gospel, as we evangelize, all these, we're making the 1,000-year history. We had churches, whether we leased in or moved. Over the last 40 years, the international gospel, I know in just 2 years, it'll be 40 years for American Providence in just 2 years, right? So think about that. That's pretty incredible and awesome too, is that for 40 years, we've had the gospel, spreading internationally. What about Warmyongdong? That's one of the greatest graces. Inside Warmyongdong, there's what? There's the medicinal spring water that's healed many people. And we need to realize, like, this one thing that was really shocking to me is like, hey, there's going to be even more grace that comes to Providence. And we're going to be even stronger in the future over the next 10 to 20 years, which means it's while we're still living. Just wait, 10 to 20 years. Wait for 2030, 2040, 2050. We're going to see Providence grow stronger and stronger and stronger. And we're going to either be a part of it or we're not going to be a part of it, right? And this one thing that I thought was very awesome, like interesting too, like me being a second generation Christian, something's like the present Providence was made by the second generation of Christians. Almost all of them were second generation Christians. I am also a second generation Christian. I'm a third generation Christian. Both the second generation Christians and second generation Providence people are precious. Whoever realizes the will and works hard becomes the owner. Even now, there are many second generation Christians who came from Christianity. They are like Paul. And I was just like, wow. That's the importance of those that came from before. Right? That's the importance. So I hope it's something that we can open our hearts to even more. You know, this was such a hungry message, so many different points. I can't even go into all the different points there. But I hope that, you know, when we receive the grace, or when God shows himself to us, you know, I hope that all of us can value the grace that God gives us. Right? So, I like it says, when it comes to grace, sometimes you'll see the Trinity by setting the conditions yourself. So like, you know, you see the face, well, you'll never see literally the face of God, the face of God, the face of the Holy Spirit and stuff like that too. And sometimes God will grant you the grace and let you, you know, sometimes we work hard to see God or see the Holy Spirit of the Lord. And sometimes, you know, we get grace and then we get to see them without a condition too. It really depends. But, you know, the one thing is, like, a lot of times we're trying to think about, oh, can we see with our physical eyes? But, you know, Sun seems obviously telling us is that, you know, sometimes you can't see with your physical eyes or spiritual eyes. But if you heard the word that was given, that is grace. The word is God. So I think that's another way that we're always seeing God too, is sometimes we're thinking way too physically and sometimes too spiritually, where the message is basically, no. The word is God. So if you hear the word, you are seeing God. Maybe not with your physical eyes and not even with your spiritual eyes, but you are receiving, you're seeing God through listening to the word, right? I like how we went over certain types of grace. Letting you wake up and pray at pre-dawn is grace. Letting you realize during prayer is grace, right? The grace of loving you is a huge thing. And this 1,000-year history is a time period of love, the grace of love. God treats us like brides as counterparts of love, and that is grace, right? And if you want God to be with you, how does he accompany you? He's with you through the word. And that's why we need to connect. Connect to him, because we need to hear the word. But if your hearts don't, if you don't hear the word well, you're not going to connect to God. God's not going to accompany you because you're not connecting to the word, right? So this is something that we have to really understand even more, is listen to the word well. If you hear the word, this is when you connect with God. This part here is, even though it seems that the people of faith may forget people or things, but will never forget God, the Holy Spirit and the Lord, at least, they frequently forget them. So here we are as people of God, but we frequently forget the Holy Trinity. And he says, how do you solve this? You must be set on fire and live the life of the word, right? That is something that I looked at and said, yeah, if the reason why we forget them is because we're not on fire for the Holy Trinity. We're just not on fire for them. Not forgetting God, the Holy Spirit, and the Lord is being alive. You're alive when you don't forget. That itself is grace. Because when you forget, even the words God conveys to you will not get delivered. Only when you think about God can you receive the word the Holy Spirit conveys to you through inspiration in your heart and thoughts, right? So we have to be those that continually receive that grace and know the grace we receive and not forget that grace. And that shows that we really value it. What was another point that I really liked here? Oh, realize at the time you are given inspiration. This is grace. When you realize at the time you're given inspiration, that's grace. And this is when you become a genius of faith, when you realize in real time. Right? Realizing is grace. That's one of the most famous proverbs on MSD is realizing is grace. Okay? This one point said, a wise person is this. A wise person knows this. If something looks similar in appearance and form to an original object, they know it is symbolic. Rejoicing and being glad upon seeing it is wisdom. Therefore, God enlightens people about God's great truth by speaking and teaching using parables. And I think that's a huge thing that we learn through the word, right? Foolish people understand and believe it only if its appearance and form are the same as the original work. Treat it like the original, learn and rejoice from looking at it. And this one, we have all these other different things, like examples of not understanding the symbolism, right? Something that is like it. For instance, John the Baptist was like Elijah, right? Jesus is like God. Sunseem too, in the same way, because he is like Jesus, this is why we understand it to that level. The wise person and the genius immediately know that something is the same as the other object because they're similar will, similar characteristics, similar meaning, right? And that's why, the message was saying that who's the wise? The wise one knows that Jesus went up in spirit and he's going to come back down in spirit. Foolish people only think literally, right? Only think about things fulfilled literally. And that's why we need to know symbols and parables. If we don't know, it can't even be fulfilled even if we wait, right? And I think that this is now talking about the word, of being wise in the word too. I talked about Elijah, I talked about Jesus, the return of both of them, and we have to understand the symbolism, right? A wise person knows from the past, right? They'll learn from the past. This is what it was like before. Oh, this is what it means here. Foolish people are the ones thinking that Jesus will come back in the flesh. That's a foolish person, right? So, as the message went on, we had like 7-8 different videos, right? Talking about symbolism, about the things in Wolmyeongdong, right? And I think one of the things that we have to understand, and I think is very important for us, like I'm not going to go over all the different 21 things, the shape of Wolmyeongdong, the different symbolisms that you're going to see, because, it's far better to watch it with the videos, right? Knowing about the feng shui and stuff like that too. And, I would say this, the most important part about Sunseem explaining in detail of every single symbolic image in the Bible, I would say is this. Personally, my feeling when I was listening to it is, Sunseem is talking about this. And I see it as not only for us to realize now, but for the entire future to realize about too, especially when he talks about it and shows the pictures and videos in detail. Once you see it in detail, I was like thinking to myself, I was like, wow, it's almost like Sunseem is talking to people 500 years later. He wants them to understand it very clearly. He wants them to know how important these shapes and these things are, that we need to know the symbolism that's involved with it, right? Whether it's this, Wolmyeongdong looks like a star shape or a dragon or an eagle or a flower. There's like so many different things that were shown there, right? Talking about the feng shui and all the people saying that it is the perfect place and such. I think it's something that we have to realize. Sunseem is not just saying this for our sake. He's saying it for who? For the sake of all the people listen for the next 1,000 years, so that they know and they'll appreciate and they'll realize it even more deeply too, right? So that's why I would say that is something that we have to think very carefully about. And I hope it's something that we will realize even more as we listen and watch listen to the message and stuff too. Okay, so that's gonna be the what's I'm going through when it comes to the Sunday message word study. Hope it's something that you guys enjoyed, received a lot of grace from too. If you have any other questions or any things you want to add, go ahead, leave in the comments below. All right. So before we move into Provi In The Media, let's get into the last music break of the day.
Yeah, Providence History represents Sierra Leone, West Africa.
On the mix.
Since the day that I made this history, my spirit became brand new. Thanks be to the Holy Trinity for making my whole life new. I know one said I said the greatest condition for making my whole life new. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. Since the day that I made this history, my spirit became brand new. Thanks be to the Holy Trinity for making my whole life new. I know one said I said the greatest condition for making my whole life new. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. We give thanks and praise to the Holy Trinity and the one sent in this history of providence. We empty our thoughts and we receive only words that is stronger than the rod and sharper than the sword. In the fight it like a battle, like a lion in the jungle, not stopping at the middle, but we take it to the ending. The word that will make us fly like an eagle. We are overwhelmed with joy with our body, soul and spirit, cause it's true word of God that is giving us joy. Every night and day we are seeking the Lord, moreover taking action resembling the Lord and spreading it in the world. Since the day that I made this history, my spirit became brand new. Thanks be to the Holy Trinity for making my whole life new. I know one said I said the greatest condition for making my whole life new. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. Since the day that I made this history, my spirit became brand new. Thanks be to the Holy Trinity for making my whole life new. I'm the one said I said the greatest condition for making my whole life new. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Just wanna say thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Is your history, is a history, Providence history, came to me like a mystery. Is your history, is a history, Providence history, came to me like a mystery. Since the day that I came to Providence, my spirit became brand new. Thanks be to the Holy Trinity for making my dreams come true. And the ones that I said the greatest condition for making everything new. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. We just wanna say thank you, thank you. Since the day that I made this history, my spirit became brand new. Thanks be to the Holy Trinity for making my whole life new. I know one said I said the greatest condition for making my whole life new. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Just wanna say thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I just wanna say thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you.
It's Kima on the mix.
Okay, so let's get into today's final segment on this Monday podcast. Lots of things to think about, but eventually, the one thing that we do look forward to is the updates on what's happening with Sunsteam's trial and stuff like that too. Not a lot of stuff that's coming out. I can only give you maybe like 2 small updates, nothing really big out there right now, but we do know that they're hoping to get this Sunsteam's trial, that last trial done on July 25th. Hopefully everything gets done by that time. couple things that have been decided for that next trial on July 25th. The courts have decided that it's not necessary to bring Maple back to the stand as a witness. And they said that everything was stated in the first trial. And if there are any mistakes or things done incorrectly in that witness testimony in the first trial, then there's no need to bring back the witness for another. If you've already asked her all the questions, there's no need to talk about it even more. So I know for us, we might think to ourselves like, hey, that seems kind of wrong. But I would say if we look at it from a broader perspective, remember the rulings that the court makes, it has to do with the rule of law. And I think that in general, imagine it's just another case, not something that we're tied to. If someone who's gone through, let's just pretend, or they say they're accused of a sexual crime, if someone's gone through something like that, to continue to put them on the stand I don't think is a good precedent to put. And I think if you look at it from like a magnified point of view, imagine if it was you and your case and it happened to you. Would you want to go back on the stand and talk about it again and again and again? I don't think that's something that they want to continue to do, especially, as a court, they should be unbiased. So they're thinking that, they're saying it's true, so we'll respect them like it's true until it's proven true or other, right? So I think from our perspective, looking from our emotional attachment to this trial, we could look at it as a really wrong thing. Why are they not bringing her to the stand? But I would say that, we just take it as it is, look at it from a broader perspective. So that's just one of the things that came out. And another article that came out it's kind of tied to Sunsim's case because it's mentioned, but it also talks about just the prosecution in Korea, how Korea prosecutes in general, and how the system is not good for prosecutors. So I think it was like the president was talking about this, and also the head prosecutor, his name is Prosecutor General Lee, during the meeting for prosecution, I guess one of these law meetings, he said, quote unquote, "We are stubbornly repeating a reckless experiment that is not found in any other country in the world," adding, "We have created a ragged criminal justice system and are not taking any responsibility, and we are once again conducting a so-called investigation with the goal of completely depriving the prosecution of its right to investigate." He brought up the dogma of separation of prosecution, and he pointed out investigation and indictment cannot be divided like two sides of the same coin. The prosecutor is responsible for everything from the investigation to the indictment and maintaining the indictment. He also added, to decide on indictment, the prosecutor also checks the facts through the investigation. Don't try to see, hear, and investigate for yourself, he emphasized. You can't decide on an indictment that could put a person's life at stake just based on documents prepared by someone else. In many advanced countries where the rule of law is established, prosecutors are responsible for the entire criminal justice process, including investigation, prosecution, and maintenance of prosecution, and there's no room for argument that this is the global standard. So this is a global standard which is not being done in Korea, and this is the Prosecutor General. Some of the examples he brought up included Sunsim's case too, right? So I think it's something that we really have to, this is kind of a good sign that they are talking about this, and we get to see how the Korean justice system is very different than the global standard itself, that the prosecution is basing their entire prosecution on documents that they have not handled themselves, right? And that's why there's this big gap between what they know and what they're trying to try. So I think that's something that we do have to think about, and that's something that we have to understand very, very carefully. Right, so those are the only two updates that are coming up. I hope it's something that helps you guys to understand a lot more deeply. If you have any questions, let me know, and if you have anything to add or just comment on these two articles, just put in the comments below too. Okay, so there it is, guys. That is the end of today's Monday podcast. Hope you guys super enjoyed it. I'm here inside my car in Ipoh. Hopefully you guys are enjoying your Monday, and enjoy it, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly, so let's realign. Just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can